Hi, in this video I'll be demonstrating how to change the belt and the idler pulley on a Speed Queen washing machine that is not spinning properly. Make sure the unit has completed its cycle, switched off and unplugged. Right, on the front of the unit you'll see a screw on the left and the right hand side. This is a size 8mm. Right, after removing the screws, I just grab the side there and it comes out. So there's these steel pieces which seat into these openings here. So this cover has to drop down. If you only need to replace the belt with this model, you just need to open the clips, remove the water pump, and you can change the belt. But because I'm going to check the idler pulley, I have to remove the whole motor housing. So I'm going to have to release the spring. So I'm just turning the drum a bit closer to the spring. The spring is now quite loose, and I'm just going to grab it here and unseat the spring. There we go. Right, so I need to release these two hoses so that I can remove this whole unit. So I'm just going to unscrew these flat screws. Right, I'll just put a towel here to absorb the water once I remove the pipes. Don't try and just pull it off, rather try and twist it. See, I'm twisting it, and as I twist it, it's easier to get it off. Just be careful of being too vigorous. Sometimes on old machines there can be rusted edges here and cut the skin quite easily. So I'm just moving this. Right, there's the water. Right, so in order to get this unit off, I need to remove this capacitor as well as this earth wire. So I'm going to remove the earth wire first. I'm now going to remove this capacitor. There's just a 8mm nut on the side there. Just be careful, do not touch or short out those terminals. Right, to remove this wiring harness, I just need to squeeze it on either end. And there comes the wiring harness. I just pinched it on either side. Now at this point we want to remove this belt. I'm just pushing it down and turning at the same time. It's coming off the track there, and I can just turn it while it's off the track. Right, so the belt is completely free now. Right, now we've got a couple of screws to remove. There are 4 of them. Right, this is a size 13mm. You might want to support this while you're unscrewing the last screw. There we go. Right, the 2 top screws have washers and the 2 bottom screws do not. Right, just make sure the belt is completely released. Then what I do is I lean it there. These 2 flanges have cleared the drum, and I can angle it out and slowly slide it out. There we go. Right, so here's the unit. If you've got a blower, it's a good idea to blow it out. And I'm just flipping it upside down. Reason being is I need to get this old belt out, so I need to remove this pump. This pump is held in place by these 3 spring clips. On older models, there are torque screws which hold the pump in place. So I just need to release these clips. I'm just taking a long nose pliers, I'm just bending it open. Now I'm just sliding the pump off. If yours doesn't come out easily, just tap it. One side, one side, one side, one side, and just go around and eventually it will pop off. Right, here's the belt. I can see it's got some tears in here, and over there it's completely damaged. You can see there's some major problems here. All right, so here is the replacement belt. They call this the green belt. This is the belt for this unit. Notice that it's got this green writing on it. I'm just giving this a wipe. I just use rubbing alcohol, which is just 90% alcohol. There's no glycol. Right, in my case, the pulley is fine. The sides are fine. You can see the track is fine. There's no cracks. When I spin it, there's no weird noise. It's got almost no lateral free play, so I'm not changing any of these parts. I'm just going to open it to demonstrate how to change it. You will need a circlip remover. This is what it looks like, and all I do is I insert the 2 pins there where the holes are on that circlip, and I open that to remove the circlip. Then there's a washer, and there comes the pulley. There's another washer, and then there's a thin, almost like a springy washer. Right, so in my case, I'm not changing the pulley, so I'm just going to return these items. It's a little bit sticky here, so I'm just going to clean it with the rubbing alcohol. Right, so it's that warped washer, then that normal washer. Right, now just inspect the shaft. It should be very smooth. If there's any imperfections or damage, you can either replace it or take a very fine sandpaper and smooth it out. So over here, I've got a 600 grit sandpaper. You could first go around with the 600, followed by a 1200 just to polish it. It should be extremely smooth. Now notice these edges are quite sharp, and I feel like when I slide this in, it might scratch the inside of that. So I'm just going to file these a little bit down. And then just remember to go over it with a 1200 just to polish it so it's completely smooth. Right, that is completely smooth. So since my pulley is actually fine, I'm going to reuse it. If you find that your pulley is a little bit scuffed inside there and you don't want to replace it, obviously you should replace it. But what you can do is you can just Wrap the 600 grit sandpaper around a screwdriver, just put it inside there and just spin this. And move your screwdriver around like that and just smooth it out if there was any rough spots there. And then just remember to go over it with 1,000 or a 1,200 just to polish it so there are no burrs and it's completely smooth. And then I just wipe it with my alcohol and just clean it out completely. Right, to reassemble a kind of spring washer, then the regular washer. Now at this point I lubricate it with wheel bearing grease. Right, doesn't need a lot, just a bit. And just a little bit on the washer. Right, I just put a dab of wheel bearing grease that will find its way in there. I then put the washer and I return the circlip. I just make sure the circlip is tight. I spin this a few times and now I wipe away any excess grease. Right, there is the pulley. Now on this side it goes washer, bolt, and this is going to go through the frame and then I'm going to use this nut. Now note that this nut can only go so far. So what you're going to find is once I tighten it, the pulley is going to be able to move. Right, so you can just polish this to make sure that it's completely smooth using that 1,000 or 1,200 grit sandpaper, and also over here. Then I just wipe it and I put just a dab of grease, just a tiny bit, and then just a tiny bit on this side. Right, I just pad the socket so that when I insert the bolt, it doesn't fall all the way in. Now using a long nose pliers or something just to hold the nut. And then I just wedge my long nose pliers to tighten the nut. If you're really struggling to get that in, you can remove these 4 nuts, take away this frame, and then work from the other side. I can now insert my brand new belt, which goes like that. Notice that the tensioner deflects on the back of the belt. So as you can see, as there's more pressure on the belt, notice that tensioner moves. So I'm going this way around. Right, now I clean my pump. It is directional. So the wider part is going there and there. Now mine is not sitting on. And the reason being is that I need to turn this because that feeds in there. So I'm just turning this until it sits. There we go. Right, so notice the belt comes through there. Right, so notice the layout of the belt here. Right, make sure your pump is seated correctly. I just give it a couple of taps and now I can just close it with these spring clamps. So I just hook it and I press it and that's it. Right, pump is in place and now I can go and reinstall this. Right, I just blew this out to the blower and I'm just wiping this with some rubbing alcohol. Right, so there's the belt coming in at the back. I've got to get this unit in. So I first clear the bottom and then I go with the top. So the bottom is cleared. Right, now at this point I don't worry about the belt, I just mount the motor. Right, so that goes on the inside of that. Right, this might be quite difficult to mount. I find it's easier if I put my hand underneath, but it's much easier if you've got a second person to hold it in place. The ones at the bottom do not have washers. Right, don't tighten any of these until all the screws are in place. Once all the screws are in place, I can now tighten them. Right, so just unhook the tensioner now. Right, so the tensioner is loose. I'll rehook that shortly. Right, I'll make sure the belt is on this wheel. Right, now feed the belt around the drum wheel. And I turn as I go. You can see I'm actually turning it to get on that track. Right, just make sure the belt is threaded correctly here. And there in the background you can see the tensioner moving. Just make sure that the belt is on the track. Now I can pull the tensioner using the spring. Alright, just spin the drum a bit and make sure that the belt is turning properly and it's feeding in the track of the tensioner and the main drum wheel. Right, to return the wiring harness. Just a note about the wiring harness, it's a finicky connector, so just check that none of the pins have bent, otherwise you won't be able to get the connector in. Right, return the earth wire. Right, return the capacitor. Right, better if you've got 2 people to do this job. Right, confirm it's in place. Just make sure that the spring pops out of that hole there. Right, now I just need to connect the hoses. I'll start with the one at the back. Right, the back hose is connected. Just make sure this is clean. Right, I make the hoses quite tight, but don't make it very tight that it pierces through the rubber. Right, return the cover. And there it's fixed. You can see how well it's spinning. and when I close it, there's no noise.